Your grandfather's victory garden wasn't just about patriotism and fresh produce. It was about growing food that wouldn't land your family in the hospital. 20 common vegetables that had fed families for generations were suddenly being restricted, banned outright, or quietly discouraged. Number 20. Rhubarb leaves. Rhubarb stalks were perfectly fine for pies and preserves. Everyone knew that. But those massive elephant ear leaves contained concentrated oxalic acid at levels that could cause kidney failure. In 1947, a Cincinnati hospital treated 8 children in a single month for rhubarb leaf poisoning. The kids had seen their mothers harvesting the stalks and figured the big green leaves must be edible too. 3 of those children ended up with permanent kidney damage. Garden clubs started removing it from their approved planting lists. The liability concerns were just too serious. Here's what made it worse. During World War II, the government had actually encouraged rhubarb cultivation as a vitamin C source. Families across America planted it, and by the early 50s, there were mature rhubarb patches in backyards from coast to coast, right where children played unsupervised all summer long. Number 19. Jerusalem artichokes. During World War II, Jerusalem artichokes were promoted as a potato substitute. By 1944, over 2 million American families were growing them. The USDA distributed free seed stock. Agricultural extension offices held workshops on cultivation and preparation. Then peacetime hit, and families discovered something the wartime nutrition guides had conveniently left out. Jerusalem artichokes contain massive amounts of inulin, a carbohydrate that the human digestive system absolutely cannot process efficiently. The result was gas and bloating so severe that entire families would be in digestive distress for days after a single meal. By 1953, Ladies' Home Journal published an article titled "Garden Vegetables Your Family Will Actually Eat," which specifically warned against Jerusalem artichokes. Seed companies stopped carrying them. Agricultural extensions quietly removed them from recommended planting guides. The 1950s suburban dinner table had no room for a vegetable that caused that kind of social embarrassment. Number 18. Pokeweed greens. Down south, pokeweed greens were spring tradition going back to colonial times. Every April, families would harvest the young shoots, boil them twice to remove the toxins, and serve them as the first fresh greens of the season. But here's what changed in the 1950s. Medical understanding caught up with folk wisdom, and the results were terrifying. Research showed that pokeweed contains phytolactotoxin and phytolactogenin, compounds that can cause respiratory paralysis and death. Every single part of the plant, except the youngest leaves, contains these toxins in dangerous concentrations. The roots are essentially lethal. In 1956, a Tennessee family of 5 was hospitalized after mistakenly including mature pokeweed stems in their spring greens. The father died. That incident made national news and sparked a campaign by Southern agricultural extension offices to discourage pokeweed cultivation. They published pamphlets with stark warnings. They visited garden clubs and church groups. By 1960, pokeweed had gone from traditional spring green to dangerous weed that needed eradication. The problem was timing. As suburbs expanded and young families moved into new developments, they inherited yards where pokeweed had been growing wild for decades. Children who'd never been taught which plants were dangerous were playing in yards where potentially lethal plants grew freely. Number 17. Castor beans. These dramatic plants with burgundy leaves and striking seed pods had been the showpiece of 1940s landscaping. They grew 8 feet tall in a single season, providing instant privacy screens and tropical flair. Then the 1950s brought something new to American suburbs. Lots of young children playing in unfenced yards, while mothers focused on housework inside. Castor beans contain ricin, one of the deadliest natural substances on Earth. A single seed contains enough ricin to kill a child. Just handling the seeds can cause absorption through skin. In 1953, a 6-year-old boy in Ohio died after eating 3 castor bean seeds he found while playing in his yard. The investigation revealed that the decorative plants had been there for years, planted by the previous owners. That incident sparked a nationwide push to eliminate castor beans from residential areas. The Garden Club of America issued warnings. Seed catalogs stopped offering them for home gardeners. Nurseries pulled them from their ornamental plant sections. By 1958, many municipalities had actually made it illegal to plant castor beans in residential zones. The beautiful foliage simply wasn't worth the body count. Number 16, lamb's quarters. This was Depression-era survival food. When money was tight and store-bought vegetables were luxuries, families gathered lamb's quarters from roadsides and field edges. It grew everywhere, required no cultivation, and was more nutritious than spinach. But the 1950s brought a cultural shift that transformed lamb's quarters from food source to enemy number one. Suburban lawn culture was exploding. Companies like Scotts and ChemLawn were selling the American dream of a perfect, weed-free lawn. Lamb's quarters, with its fast growth and prolific seed production, was classified as a noxious weed. The chemical 2,4-D had just been released for residential use in 1949, and it killed lamb's quarters effectively. By 1955, over 15 million American homeowners were applying chemical herbicides to their lawns regularly. Agricultural extension offices that had promoted lamb's quarters as emergency food during the Depression were now teaching homeowners how to eliminate it. The USDA stopped including it in publications about edible wild plants. Within a decade, an entire generation grew up not knowing that the weed their fathers sprayed every Saturday had once kept their grandparents fed. Number 15, ground cherries. These little golden fruits in papery husks were beloved by children in the 1940s. They grew wild in disturbed soil, and kids would gather them like treasure. But ground cherries belonged to the nightshade family, and the 1950s brought heightened awareness of nightshade toxicity. Here's what happened. Research confirmed that unripe ground cherries contain solanine, the same toxin found in green potatoes. Several incidents of children getting sick from eating unripe ground cherries made local news across the Midwest. Then, in 1954, a botanical guide mistakenly illustrated ground cherries next to deadly nightshade, implying they were closely related. The truth is, they're distant cousins. But suburban parents weren't taking chances. The combination of nightshade fears and ground cherries' aggressive spreading habit sealed their fate. They were messy, hard to control, and potentially dangerous. Garden clubs discouraged them. Seed companies stopped carrying them. By the end of the decade, ground cherries had virtually disappeared from American gardens. Number 14, amaranth greens. Amaranth had sustained civilizations for thousands of years. The Aztecs grew it as a staple crop. Depression-era Americans gathered wild amaranth as pot greens. But the 1950s agricultural revolution had other plans. This was the dawn of hybrid vegetables, commercial farming, and frozen food convenience. The USDA and land-grant universities were developing improved vegetable varieties with uniform growth, predictable harvests, and commercial viability. Amaranth, which grew like a weed and had dozens of regional varieties, didn't fit the new agricultural model. Extension offices promoted commercial crops. Seed catalogs featured the latest hybrids. Amaranth was dismissed as primitive, weedy, and old-fashioned. The rise of frozen vegetables hit the final nail. Why grow amaranth when you could buy bird's-eye frozen spinach at the supermarket? By 1960, amaranth had been relegated to the category of agricultural history, something primitive people ate before modern farming arrived. Number 13. Purslane. This succulent little plant contains more omega-3 fatty acids than any other leafy vegetable. It's drought-tolerant, prolific, and virtually impossible to kill. But purslane made one fatal mistake. It looked like a weed. The plant grows low to the ground in sprawling mats. It has small, thick leaves and tiny yellow flowers. To a 1950s homeowner trying to achieve that perfect suburban lawn, purslane was the enemy. Chemical companies marketed specific herbicides for purslane elimination. Scott's lawn care guides featured purslane prominently in their weed identification sections. Agricultural extension publications taught homeowners to recognize and destroy it. The irony is staggering. While Americans were spending money on supplements and vitamins, they were systematically poisoning one of nature's most nutritious plants out of their yards. By 1958, purslane had been so successfully rebranded as a pest that most people didn't even know it was edible. Number 12. Dandelion greens. Your great-grandmother harvested dandelion greens every spring. They were the first fresh greens after winter, packed with vitamins A, C, and K. But the 1950s declared war on dandelions, and eating them became almost shameful. The chemical 2,4-D, developed as a wartime herbicide, was remarketed for residential lawn care starting in 1949. Companies like O.M. Scott & Sons launched massive advertising campaigns showing the perfect American lawn, completely free of dandelions. Eating dandelions became associated with poverty and old-fashioned ways. Suburban families wanted to appear modern and prosperous. Store-bought vegetables from the supermarket signaled success. Wild greens from the yard signaled failure. By 1955, Americans were spending over $50 million annually on dandelion elimination. The nutritious greens that had sustained families for generations were being systematically poisoned and discarded. Number 11. Garlic mustard. European settlers brought this plant to America in the 1800s for food and medicine. The leaves have a garlicky flavor perfect for spring salads and cooked greens. But by the 1950s, conservation biologists had identified a serious problem. Garlic mustard was taking over native woodlands. The plant releases chemicals into the soil that prevent other plants from germinating. It spreads aggressively, producing thousands of seeds per plant. It was choking out native wildflowers across the eastern United States. In 1958, the Nature Conservancy launched its first invasive species education campaign, and garlic mustard was Exhibit A. Agricultural extensions taught people to recognize and destroy it. Conservation groups organized removal events. The message was clear. Garlic mustard wasn't food anymore. It was an ecological threat. The fact that it was perfectly edible became irrelevant compared to its environmental impact. Number 10. Stinging nettles. Nettles were traditional spring tonic greens. Cooking eliminated the sting and revealed a nutritious vegetable similar to spinach, high in iron, calcium, and vitamins. But suburban living made nettles unacceptable. Parents didn't want children accidentally brushing against plants that caused painful stings. The plant's aggressive spreading habit made it incompatible with neat suburban gardens. As wild foraging knowledge faded, fewer people knew how to safely harvest and prepare nettles. Supermarket vegetables were convenient and sting-free. Why risk the painful stings when spinach was available year-round at the grocery store? By the late 1950s, nettles had transitioned from valuable food to dangerous weed that needed elimination. Number 9. Plantain. Not the banana-like fruit, but the common lawn weed with broad leaves and seed stalks. This plant was nature's first aid kit. The leaves could be chewed and applied to insect stings, cuts, and rashes for immediate relief. Generations of Americans used plantain as outdoor medicine. But the 1950s lawn care industry declared plantain public enemy number 2 right after dandelions. The plant's broad leaves disrupted lawn uniformity. Herbicide companies included it prominently in their marketing materials as a weed to eliminate. Modern medicine also reduced the need for backyard remedies. Why use plantain when you could buy Band-Aids and antibiotic ointment at the drugstore? By 1960, most Americans saw plantain as nothing more than a persistent lawn weed, completely unaware their grandparents had considered it invaluable. Number 8. Wood sorrel. Children called this plant sourgrass and would nibble its lemony stems like natural candy. The heart-shaped leaves and tangy flavor made it popular with kids. But wood sorrel contains oxalic acid, and 1950s health awareness campaigns raised concerns. Too much oxalic acid can interfere with calcium absorption and, in extreme cases, contribute to kidney stones. The plant's clover-like appearance also caused identification concerns. Several incidents of children eating true clover while thinking it was wood sorrel led to warnings. As parents became more cautious about unsupervised outdoor play and wild food gathering, wood sorrel was increasingly treated as something children shouldn't eat. By the end of the decade, it was just another weed to eliminate from tidy suburban yards. Number 7. Chicory. Chicory root was Depression-era coffee substitute. Roasted and ground, it provided a caffeine-free coffee-like beverage when money was tight. But 1950s prosperity made such substitutes seem unnecessary and even embarrassing. Real coffee was affordable again. Drinking chicory coffee marked you as unable to afford the real thing. The bitter greens also fell from favor, as American taste preferences shifted toward milder, sweeter vegetables. Chicory's deep taproot made it difficult to control in suburban gardens, where shallow-rooted annuals were preferred. Agricultural extension services stopped promoting chicory. Seed catalogs dropped it. By 1960, chicory survived mainly as a roadside wildflower, its food uses forgotten. Number 6. Common mallow. Children called the seed pods cheeses for their round, wheel-like shape and would eat them as snacks. The leaves were edible too, cooked like spinach, but mallow's sprawling growth habit made it incompatible with 1950s garden aesthetics. The plant would spread across garden beds and lawns, impossible to contain. Chemical herbicides made it easy to eliminate. As processed foods became more available and convenient, the need to gather wild edibles like mallow diminished. By the late 1950s, most Americans saw mallow as a persistent garden pest, nothing more. Number 5. Violet leaves. These heart-shaped leaves were spring salad additions, prized for vitamin C content that exceeded oranges. But the 1950s brought new concerns about eating anything not clearly identified as a commercial crop. The similarity between violet leaves and other plants led to safety warnings from agricultural extensions. The rise of supermarket produce made wild greens seem risky and unnecessary. Why gather violet leaves when you could buy iceberg lettuce safely? Suburban lawn care also targeted violets as weeds, disrupting the perfect grass carpet. Chemical treatments gradually eliminated them from most yards. Number 4. Cleavers. This sticky climbing plant had edible young shoots that were nutritious and mild when cooked. But cleavers' aggressive growth and tendency to cling to everything made it unwelcome in suburban gardens. The plant would climb fences, grab onto clothing, and spread seeds everywhere through its Velcro-like seed pods. Its wild, uncontrolled appearance didn't fit 1950s garden standards. As Americans moved from foraging to supermarket shopping, knowledge of edible weeds like cleavers disappeared. By 1960, it was just another nuisance to eliminate. Number 3. Shepherd's purse. This small plant, with heart-shaped seed pods, was used as both food and medicine. The leaves could be eaten like mild mustard greens. But shepherd's purse contains compounds affecting blood clotting, and 1950s medical establishment discouraged self-medication with wild plants. Safety concerns led to warnings against its use. The plant's weedy appearance and small size made it seem insignificant compared to the large, impressive vegetable seed companies were promoting. As suburban gardening focused on clearly defined ornamental and food crops, shepherd's purse became just another unwanted weed. Number 2. Wild onions. These provided flavor when cultivated onions weren't available, but their strong smell and tendency to make milk taste bad when eaten by dairy cows led to classification as a pasture weed. In suburban settings, wild onions disrupted lawn uniformity. Their persistent bulbs made them difficult to eliminate without chemicals. The 1950s preference for mild, predictable flavors also worked against wild onions, which could be quite pungent. By the late 1950s, they were targeted for elimination from both pastures and lawns. Number 1. Watercress. This was once considered a delicacy, gathered from clean streams and springs by families who prized its peppery bite. It's incredibly nutritious, containing more vitamin C than oranges, more iron than spinach, and more calcium than milk. But the 1950s brought new awareness of water pollution that changed everything. Post-war industrial expansion meant factory runoff entering streams. Agricultural chemicals were washing into waterways. The new pesticide DDT was showing up in water sources. In 1952, the Public Health Service issued warnings about gathering wild foods from natural water sources. Several outbreaks of liver flukes and other waterborne parasites were traced to wild watercress. Health departments across the country began warning against gathering it from streams. The rise of supermarket produce made wild watercress seem unnecessary and potentially dangerous. By 1960, it had virtually disappeared from American tables, despite being one of the most nutritious vegetables available. These 20 vegetables tell a bigger story about how America transformed in the 1950s. We went from a nation of gardeners and foragers who knew the land and its offerings to suburban consumers who trusted stores more than their own knowledge. We let fear and fashion dictate what was acceptable to grow and eat. Many of these plants are experiencing a comeback today. Modern foragers are rediscovering their value. Farmers markets sell them as specialty greens. Restaurants feature them on menus. We're learning again what our grandparents knew all along. Some of the most nutritious foods grow wild and free, if only we know how to recognize them.